Imagine the monster isn't a stranger. Imagine he isn't hiding in the shadows or lurking in a dark alleyway. Imagine he is the very person who is supposed to protect you more than anyone else in the world. This is the story of a young woman whose prison wasn't a cell in some distant penitentiary. It was located directly beneath her own family home. For more than 2 decades, she existed just feet below her family, hidden behind a series of reinforced doors. And the man who put her there was her own father. This is the harrowing, unbelievable case of Elisabeth Fritzl. In the late summer of 1984, an 18-year-old girl named Elisabeth vanished from her home in the quiet town of Amstetten, Austria. Her mother, Rosemarie Fritzl, distraught and terrified, reported her missing immediately. Local police launched an investigation, searching the town and interviewing friends for weeks. But they found absolutely nothing, not a single piece of evidence, not a trace of where she had gone. Then, about a month later, the family received a handwritten letter. The note, postmarked from a nearby town and written in Elisabeth's distinct handwriting, claimed she was tired of living at home, wanted to be left alone, and was leaving the country. She warned her family that if anyone came looking for her, she would flee even further. Police analyzed the handwriting and confirmed it was a match. Combined with the fact that Elisabeth had previously tried to run away as a teenager to escape a volatile home life, investigators officially concluded she had simply left of her own free will to join a cult. The file was eventually shelved. The case went cold. What nobody knew was that Elisabeth hadn't gone anywhere at all. To the outside world, Elisabeth's father, Josef Fritzl, was a highly respectable, successful mechanical engineer and property developer. But behind the closed doors of their home at 40 Ibstrasse, Josef was a tyrant who ruled through fear, manipulation, and physical intimidation. Out of all his children, Elisabeth alone had the defiance to stand up to his control. And because of that defiance, Josef had been quietly executing a sinister plan. For years, using his engineering expertise, Josef had been secretly excavating and building a sprawling, concealed bunker directly beneath the family home. He reinforced the walls with thick concrete and installed multiple heavy, hidden doors, the final one weighing nearly 700 pounds, completely disguised behind a bookshelf and opened only by a secret remote control electronic code. He told his wife and neighbors he was simply building a secure fallout shelter. On August 28, 1984, Josef called Elisabeth down to the cellar under the guise of needing help lifting a heavy door into place. As she held the door, Josef stepped behind her, pressed an ether-soaked rag over her face, and waited for her to lose consciousness. When Elisabeth woke up, she was in total darkness, handcuffed to a post inside the bunker. Her 24-year nightmare had just begun. What followed inside that windowless dungeon is almost impossible for the human mind to comprehend. For 24 years, Elisabeth lived in a damp, cramped, soundproof cellar with an average ceiling height of just 5 feet 11 inches. Her only connection to reality was a small television and a radio Josef provided. While her mother, Rosemarie, lived directly above her, cooking meals and watching television, Elisabeth existed in a horrific parallel world right beneath her feet. During those 24 years, Elisabeth gave birth to 7 children, all fathered by her captor. She delivered every single one of them alone on the concrete floor, without a shred of medical assistance, using only a pair of dirty scissors Josef gave her to cut the umbilical cords. Tragedy struck deep in the darkness. One infant, a twin boy named Michael, suffered severe respiratory issues shortly after birth. Elisabeth held her newborn baby in her arms, begging Josef for medical help, but he refused. Michael died in the dark, and Josef burned the infant's remains in the house's furnace upstairs. 3 of the surviving children, Kirsten, Stefan, and Felix, remained locked in the bunker with Elisabeth. They grew up having never seen a tree, never feeling the wind, and believing the concrete walls were the entire universe. The other 3 children, Lisa, Monica, and Alexander, were taken upstairs by Josef. He staged their discoveries on his own doorstep, forcing Elisabeth to write letters pretending she was a struggling cult member who had abandoned her babies. Rosemary raised them upstairs, entirely blind to the fact that her adopted grandchildren were being born directly beneath her living room floor. To keep them from rebelling, Josef used psychological terror. He told them the heavy doors were booby-trapped with high-voltage electricity and that lethal poison gas would flood the vents if they ever tried to tamper with the lock. By the spring of 2008, the horrific ecosystem Josef Fritzl had built began to collapse under the weight of biological reality. The eldest daughter living in the bunker, 19-year-old Kirsten, fell critically ill. Her organs were failing, and she lapsed into unconsciousness. Elisabeth fought like a lioness, fiercely demanding that Josef take their daughter to a hospital, threatening that she would die in the cellar if he didn't. Realizing a corpse in the bunker would ruin everything, Josef finally relented. On April 19, 2008, an elderly Josef arrived at the Landesklinicum Amstetten Hospital with an unconscious Kirsten. Doctors were deeply alarmed. Her skin was a ghost-like, translucent white, her teeth were heavily decayed, and her body was shutting down. When medical staff searched the national database, they hit a brick wall. Kirsten Fritzl did not legally exist. There was no birth certificate, no school records, and no medical history. Suspicious, the doctors immediately alerted the police. Josef's story was vague and well-rehearsed. He claimed Kirsten had suddenly been left on his doorstep by his runaway daughter, Elisabeth, along with a note. But the doctors were desperate to save the girl's life and needed her biological history. They took to national television, broadcasting an urgent appeal for the missing mother, Elisabeth, to come forward to save her daughter's life. Deep underground, watching the broadcast on her small television, Elisabeth saw her dying daughter on the screen. She knew this was her one and only chance. She forced Josef to take her to the hospital, promising she would help manage the cover-up. On April 26, 2008, Josef brought Elisabeth out of the dungeon for the first time in 8,642 days. Local police were already watching the hospital. The moment Josef and a mysterious, frail woman walked through the doors, officers intercepted them and brought them into separate interrogation rooms at the Amstetten police station. At first, Elisabeth was paralyzed with fear, refusing to speak a word. She believed her father's lies that his network of associates would kill her children if she betrayed him. But then she looked at the lead detective and made one desperate request. She would tell them everything, but only if they gave her an absolute, binding promise that she would never, ever have to see her father's face again. The police gave her their word. And then the floodgates opened. 4 hours, Elisabeth detailed the 24 years of torment, the 7 children, the isolation, and the hidden concrete labyrinth beneath 40 Ibstrasse. The story was so profoundly disturbing that investigators initially struggled to believe it, until they raided the house, located the hidden switch behind the bookshelf, and stepped down into the damp, low-ceilinged dungeon. Josef Fritzl was arrested that very night. Confronted with DNA evidence and Elisabeth's devastating taped testimony, his respectable facade shattered. In March 2009, he pled guilty to murder by negligence, rape, incest, false imprisonment, and enslavement. He was sentenced to life imprisonment at the Stein psychiatric prison. The liberation was only the first step in a grueling, unprecedented recovery process. For Stefan, Felix, and Kirsten, the world outside was terrifying. Their eyes could not handle natural sunlight. They had to live in specialized clinic rooms with adjusted lighting. Simple things we take for granted, the feeling of a breeze, the vast expanse of the open sky, the sound of birds, caused severe sensory overload. Under tight security and hidden behind new identities provided by the Austrian government, Elisabeth and her 6 surviving children were moved to a custom, fortress-like home in a secret location. Against all neurological and emotional odds, the family began to heal. The children who grew up in darkness learned to swim, to ride bikes, and to drive cars. Elisabeth, after losing her entire youth to a concrete tomb, finally got to experience the warmth of the sun and the freedom she had fought over 2 decades to reclaim. She survived. The case of Elisabeth Fritzl left a permanent scar on the collective psyche of the world. It leaves us with haunting questions that have no comfortable answers. How does a monster hide a whole secret family in a crowded suburban neighborhood for 24 years without a single neighbor noticing? How easily does evil thrive when we choose to look the other way? The house in Emstetten has since had its basement completely filled with liquid concrete, sealing that dungeon away forever. But the legacy of what happened there remains a testament to the terrifying depths of human cruelty and the miraculous resilience of the human spirit. Because in the end, Elisabeth's will to survive outlasted her father's concrete walls. Survival itself became her ultimate form of justice. If Elisabeth's bravery and the survival of her children moved you today, please take a moment to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel to join us as we continue to shine a light into the darkest corners of true crime history.